mixing time. In 2017, when I made this song, I do not think I had yet developed my good habit of bouncing everything down and moving it into a mixing file. Or at least for this song, I think I achieved what I wanted to, and I was like, screw it, let's go into mastering. So there's not a separate file for it. It's the same file in which the composition happened, but I'm going to go over what a lot of the EQ choices and what a lot of the automation that I did includes. So right out the gate, I spoke about in the composition video that almost everything is sidechained to an extent to this sidechain audio source layer. All it's doing is following the kick drum, so that whenever the kick drum hits, there's a little bit of space. Very, very common in dance music, and I know this is not like the most EDM song ever, but my background in production started when I was like a teenager, really wanting to make EDM more than anything. I mean, it technically started with me like making like guitar-y type songs, but then I quickly, once I like knew what I was doing, I quickly started making EDM for like 3 or 4 years. Anyway, everything has a little bit of sidechain on it. You should know that out the gate, except for the drums themselves, because they were the source of the audio file. Now, I am a big fan of automating some parameters throughout the song itself to actually make it be dynamic, quieter, and louder in different parts, as opposed to saying like, well, if things are ducking each other at the right rate and I've set EQs, you can just kind of hit play and that's it, bro. No, I think that some things need to go up and down in volume. So the percussion itself, the drums, right here, let's see where we are. Quick example, this is the frequency of the EQ moving up, and you'll see it right here visually at the end, so that it's not like just do do do, it's a do do do. It's losing its low frequency information, so that it sounds like it's getting further away from you. In addition, I'm sending it, I believe, where is it? Yeah, here we go. In addition, I am sending it to the reverb, the main bus reverb, so that it's actually sounds like it's getting farther away with more verb. Nothing's really happening on the subcake, so I can close this for you. The other things that are happening throughout here is the main ones I think that are important to see, is the amount that some of the elements in my drum kit are going to the overall mixer is being lowered. And this is because I have like overall effects that are affecting everything, like this compressor. So when everything is going to the output, the harder the drums hit, the more this compressor is going to move its needle. So I can show you right now. The needle's moving a little bit. When I lower the amount that the kick or the snare or the hat is going to it, it makes it so that it doesn't lower it at all. It just kind of lets it play at its lower volume, and there's no need to compress anything. I wanted it to just feel very organic as it faded out for the section before the like end of the song. Change the channel, kind of that other progression that I do at the end. And that's mainly it for the drums. I don't think there's a lot of other volume automation throughout it. It's automating to the sends largely. Oh, and then automating to decapitator. This is what I talked about before. This guy here on this bus, to add some tinsel, he brings a little bit more focus to different things. So here is it without decapitator. We're in the middle of wearing each other, wearing us out. We're in the middle of wearing each other out. And now here it is with decapitator. It's going to make the drums stand out a little bit more because they're receiving saturation. We're in the middle of wearing each other, wearing us out. We're in the middle of wearing each other out. Right. And then I quickly lower the amount that it's being sent to it back down to minus 48, but it gets up to minus 35. And I've said in the past, decapitator is very sensitive. No, but anything even like minus 30 is really noticeable. It's like, holy crap, you sent a lot to this distortion bus. But he gets automated to a couple other folks whenever I want them to become the star of the show. It's kind of my way of shining like a little bit of a spotlight on someone for just a little bit. It's like I'm heating him up for a little bit. That's actually a better way of saying it, because I'm not like moving the spotlight. It's like everyone's sitting on like a like a stove, and then I'm just turning up the heat on one person. Is that a weird? That's a weird metaphor. Some of the other drums aren't getting automated with anything. The next thing that gets automated throughout is the bass, and this happens throughout like the whole song. These little bumps on this red line that you see, and I know my video of myself is blocking a little bit for you, but these red bumps that you see are all automations of the volume. Here. So there's times that I duck it down, and there's times that I bump it up really quickly just for a little bit, because I think that bass is one of those instruments that when it hits a little bit harder, like you really notice it, like, ooh, that thumped, okay, now we're back into the groove. Unfortunately, my bass emulation synth plugin, and this is like the craziest thing, it's like a legendary synth bass that everybody loves, the Mini Moog, but what a lot of people don't know is that the Mini Moog in real life didn't have velocity control for something like volume. You couldn't like hit the key harder in order to make it louder than the next one, like you can with a real piano, or like you can when you're hitting strings on a guitar, or you could, you know, blow harder into like woodwind instruments, anything. Mini Moog didn't have that, which is crazy to think about. So you have to go and you have to automate the volume later if you want to automate it. I could probably set something up in like MIDI stuff, but I've never really been that great at like setting up a whole bunch of things on the way in. I just fix it all later on. Fix it in post. So for the, let's see what I've done here. For the bass, when it first comes in, because it's not here as part of the song, the pink tracks of the bass, I actually have it at a lower volume. So the very beginning of the first chorus, I wanted it to be quieter than other parts of the songs where I might push it. So here, and maybe this is the cost of waiting. That is much quieter at -7.5 decibels than near like the end of the song, obviously, when it's at -6.5. So it's like a whole decibel higher by this time. And maybe this is the cost of waiting. And this is a good example of a little bump that I do sometimes. So right here, it's still -6.5, but I bump it up for like 2 beats. So there's like half of a measure to -5.4, because it's probably just a note that I hit that I wanted it to be emphasized. Let's check it out. So that I wanted it to be a bit louder, so I just bump it up right there. And you go in and you have to like make these like little points, and then you kind of adjust what you want. Jesus Christ. Okay. Yeah, you adjust what you want. You can of course go in here and you can edit what the exact value you want is. You know, take another value and be like, ooh, I'm gonna lower this here. I'm gonna make this. Obviously, don't go too crazy. I think a lot of beginners. I'm not a pro, but when I was younger, I used to go crazy, and I see a lot of people who are using DAWs for the first time go really crazy on a lot of automation, and that's cool. I mean, you might be making like really, really experimental type of stuff, and that heavy of automation is going to be necessary, or like you're doing a dubstep bass, and like of course this line graph is going to be all over the place for one of those, like, you know, but for most like mixing purposes and like a pop-ish context, you won't need to do that much. Here I make it go down in volume again for the pre-chorus so that I can bump it up a little bit into this chorus. And when this chorus starts, it even starts again for the first 2 notes louder than what it will be for the rest of the chorus. That verse, boom, it was louder than the rest of them, and I had to do that manually. Onto the keys. The keys are doing something very similar. You're understanding how I work now, these little bumps that happen. And sometimes when I kind of know the length of the bump that I like and it's for a part of the song, I'm like, well, I'm going to want that on the next chorus too. I just copy the automation information, and then I can paste it elsewhere as well, and it saves me a lot of time. But this was to give it a little bit of a boost here. Let's see what's happening here. Okay, so that first key hit is a little bit louder, so we can hear it going into it now. That first one is louder. And I do it here as well. See if I go much softer anywhere. No, I think I kind of knew what volume I wanted those keys to be for most of the song, and then I just made it bump every now and then. Okay, the Talkbox Vocals are another one that is great to automate as well, even though you may think you're controlling all your dynamics when you're singing. You just need a little bit more drama at one point. So this might be when the Talkbox first comes in. I wanted you, the listeners, to be like, oh crap, is that a Talkbox that just came in? So I wanted to get your attention really quickly and then go back to what's like a normal volume. Yeah, so it's a little louder there. Yep. Do the same thing here. Another bump there, another bump there. Oh, this one is before the solo. You can see I'm ramping it up to get pretty loud before the final part. And then I just bring it back down. There's no vocals happening right there, so I can just take my time to bring it back down. The solo, does it get... No, I think the solo was at a happy volume already. The vocoder, no. Oh yeah, the main vocals. The main vocals in the very beginning, I gave it a bump as well to get your attention right as the song was starting. And then I went back down. And then I did it again for the second half before we would go into the pre-chorus. And you probably didn't perceive it when you first heard it as a sort of, oh, it's louder in this first part, like right when he says that first word. But a lot of songs do this to just get your attention that something new has been introduced, and then they'll bring it back down in volume because your brain's already aware of it. So you're going to be like actively listening to something like that, especially vocals. Yeah, and I only boosted it by a decibel, so very manageable. And now whenever we would get into the full track mixing, back at this time I was still using a technique, I guess I still do it sometimes, but you might hear people talk about it as pink noise mixing. And pink noise sounds like this. I'm going to make sure this is not super loud. Pink noise sounds like this if you've never used it to like fall asleep or something. It's not as horrid as white noise, and it's not as completely subdued as brown noise. Pink noise is supposed to be very pleasing to the ear because it has this very even fall-off ratio. When you go from low to high frequencies, they're like falling off, they're tapering at a ratio that's supposed to be really nice for us to eventually hear. Because if the low frequencies were the same level as the high frequencies, it would be white noise. And that's why you mainly associate white noise with the really high, because our ears are more sensitive to mids and highs than they are to really low stuff. So low stuff needs to be louder in order to compensate. So this pink noise should feel very balanced to the human ear. Right? A technique that a lot of people use and that I used back then is that you nix the volume on everything. So on these tracks that I have here, I would just take the faders before I automated anything, I guess. This actually happened before I made those little bumps. I'd put them all down, just completely down. And then I would play the pink noise. And while the pink noise is playing, which is why it's looping for the whole length of the song, I would take instrument by instrument, the drums, the bass, my vocals, the keys, anything, and bring them up, keep bringing them up in volume until I can just actually hear them. Like I can actually distinguish them from the pink noise, and then just pull back a little, just a little bit so that it's hiding, again, just behind the pink noise. And do that with every single instrument that you have. Now, technically, if those instruments are sort of staying in their lane, if you will, with like, I'm an instrument that occupies this, like I'm a flute, I don't get that low and I don't get that high, you know? I'm a bass, I don't get that low and I don't get that high, mostly. Then that should work perfectly. Pianos can make this really difficult because they have really low notes and they have really high notes, so it's like, oh, what are you doing, man? And vocals can make it pretty difficult too, because you might throw some really high notes there, which is why a lot of times I would break up my vocals into like the really high vocal parts and like my normal range vocal parts, and certainly not low. But once all of those are hiding behind the pink noise, then you disable the pink noise and you just play the song and you see, is this at a very comfortable, is this at a very comfortable like level that I'm okay with? Or do I need to now make some other adjustments to like my taste of what I really wanted the song to sound like? And it lets you kind of get away from what you had been working with for like, I don't know how, depending on how long you'd work on the song. If you've been working on the song for like weeks, you've been hearing things at the same level, you probably hadn't adjusted a lot of stuff, and you've gotten used to it. This helps you break out of that. Once that's all applied, things got additional EQ, but this was a song that I knew as I was making track by track and instrument by instrument, I should say, to be very clear. I knew what I wanted them to sound like, and I knew how I wanted them to fit into the context of the drums especially, because I wanted these drums to be like a classic 909 feel, but just, made a little more smacky, I guess, so that it's not like the actual 90s. It's like, 2017. And then go and automate the volume so that it feels dynamic throughout, and there are quiet parts and there are loud parts. After that, I use this tool called Span, and a lot of people use it. I don't use it anymore, actually. Now I have another tool that was provided with like another bundle that I bought, but it's just a spectrum analyzer, and it shows me how the whole song is going. So if I play from here, oh, of course, just the pink noise, sweet. Kind of gives me the shape of the song overall, and I can compare that to other songs that I like not like I like that song, but I like the sound of that song, and I like how balanced that song feels in terms of its high parts and its like low bassy parts. I love the feel of that, and I look at what that song looks like in this spectrum analyzer as well, and I see how mine compares, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm getting that same feel. Because by this time, I've put so many hours into the song that I'm just like emotionally connected to some things, and it's hard to separate myself and say, no, that bass is way too loud, turn it down, or vice versa. My big thing used to always be hi-hats. I think a lot of people's thing is making hi-hats way too loud. I think by now I'd sort of let go of that. And then once that's done, it does actually go into mastering, which would be the next thing.